This is a web accessibility talk, and here's the overview for our talk. First, I'm going to define what web accessibility is. I'm going to tell you some of the benefits that you will enjoy if you practice accessible content. I'm going to give you a rundown of how people with disabilities use the internet. I'm going to follow that with accessibility techniques, some of the most important things that you can do to make your web content accessible. And I'm going to finish up with some useful links that you can refer to as you continue to learn about web accessibility. What is web accessibility? Accessibility is the process of making web content accessible to people with disabilities. Web content includes web pages, HTML documents, PDF documents, spreadsheets, video and audio, basically anything that you can download from the internet. People with disabilities include persons with visual impairment, people who are totally blind, people who are partially blind. People with disabilities also include people with hearing impairment, people who are totally deaf or hard of hearing. They also include people with cognitive disabilities, people who are colorblind, and people with motor impairments, those who cannot use the mouse because they have limited fine motor skills. Web accessibility is also a measurement. It's a degree by which people with disabilities can access and use web content. So if your web page has high accessibility, there's a good chance that more people with disabilities can use your content. If your web page has poor accessibility, then there's a chance that a lot of people with disabilities will have problems accessing your web page or your web form. Web accessibility is something that all of us can benefit from. So it's not only for people with disabilities. One of the best examples for this would be video captions. Video captions are intended mainly for people with hearing impairments. But even if you don't have a hearing impairment, even if you have good hearing, video captions will benefit you when you're viewing your video in a noisy environment. For example, if you're in a noisy classroom or if you're in a noisy pub and you need to view a news clip, and if that news clip has video captions, you'll still be able to read and understand the content of that news clip. Later on, I'm going to cite other examples of accessibility principles that also benefit people without disabilities. Here are some of the reasons why it's a good idea to support web accessibility. More people can access, use, and enjoy your content. Accessibility benefits people with disabilities, and people with disabilities are some of the most passionate groups of users online. If a person who is blind finds that your online store can be accessed, and if he or she can purchase a product from your online store very comfortably and very accessibly, he or she is going to tweet about that experience. He or she is going to blog about that experience. And a lot of other people will be able to read about that tweet. And conversely, if your survey form is not accessible, a person who has cognitive disabilities, for instance, is going to tell his or her colleagues about that experience, and a lot of people will hear about that feedback. Better compatibility with web technologies. Accessible content can be browsed easily by people using older browsers. So in certain countries, there are still people who use older versions of Internet Explorer. And if your content is accessible, these groups of people will still be able to browse your websites comfortably, even if they use older technologies. Accessibility can also benefit people with slow internet connection. Image descriptions are beneficial to people with slow internet connection because they tend to turn off their images in their mobile devices as they have slow internet. If you make your content accessible, you can ensure that you will comply with local and international accessibility guidelines. New Zealand, for example, draws heavily from international guidelines. So if you make your content accessible locally, there's a huge chance that your content will also be accessible at an international level. There are principles within usability and principles within search engine optimization that also overlap with accessibility principles. So if you make your content accessible, there's a huge chance that you're going to make your content usable and searchable as well. Finally, accessibility is a way for you to show your readers and your viewers that you made the effort to understand their needs. It's an opportunity to demonstrate social responsibility. It's an opportunity for you to show the people that you care, that you took the time to understand their disability and provide content accordingly to their needs. I'm going to move on by showing a quick rundown of how people with disabilities use internet. These are the technologies that people with disabilities use as they access the World Wide Web. People who are blind use screen readers. Screen readers are a type of application that you either install in your computer or your computer might come built in. The main output of a screen reader is a semi-human, semi-robotic voice that reads the highlighted text on your screen. These are very helpful. The screen reader is very helpful to people who are blind because the screen reader reads content for them as they cannot visually see the text on the screen. In addition to people who are blind, people with cognitive disabilities also make use of screen readers. People with dyslexia also use screen readers. People who have low vision who choose to listen to their content rather than reading it also use screen readers. People with low vision use screen magnification software. You may have experienced the zoom feature in your tablet or your mobile device in order for you to be able to read the text more comfortably. That is the main technology being used by people with low vision as they need to magnify the text at a larger scale. People who are deaf or hard of hearing rely on visual information and captions. So when it comes to people with hearing disabilities, there are people who are totally deaf and there are people who are hard of hearing. So these are people who can hear but cannot hear properly. They rely on visual information and captions. Visual information consists of change in color in terms of submission of web forms, message boxes, and as mentioned before, captions are the text that are embedded on the videos in your online web page. People with motor disabilities, these are people who cannot use the mouse as they have limited fine motor skills. Most of these people with motor disabilities make use of the keyboard because they cannot use the mouse. Certain groups of people with disabilities use speech recognition software. This is a type of application that you install in your computer and you would use a microphone in order to verbally instruct or dictate the text that you want to input on your screen or on your document. So after talking about the technologies and the types of content that people with disabilities use in order for them to access the internet, I'd like to proceed with some of the most important things that you need to take note of as you provide accessible content. Here are a few easy tips that you can do in your web pages, in your online content, in order for it to become more accessible. The first tip or the first accessibility technique involves images. Please do provide text descriptions in your images. If you have web pages that have images, make sure that you're providing image descriptions in the alt text of your images. You can find the alt text in your source code. It's an alt attribute wherein you can include a textual description of that image. Make sure that your alt text is succinct. Try to limit it to 150 characters maximum. And please don't include image of in your text descriptions. The reason behind that is because the screen readers are already able to tell the user that the user is currently focused on an image. So there's no need to include image of in your text description. If you have detailed images, which include charts, artwork, graphs, and maps, please do provide the description inline. This means that you're going to put the text description directly below the image or place a link that takes the user to another page containing the description. Image links include print icons, help icons, and search icons. Rather than describing what the image looks like, please do include the function in the image description. So going back to that print icon, rather than describing what the printer looks like in the icon, please do just mention print, because the print icon performs a specific function. If you have decorations such as horizontal bars, spacers, vertical bars, and any image that doesn't provide content in your web pages, please do provide a null value for your alt text. The reason behind that is because the screen reader users don't need to hear spacers or horizontal bars whenever they browse the content, because those spacers and horizontal bars do not add value to the browsing experience of people with screen readers. So the main people who will benefit from this technique include people who use screen readers, as the screen readers will be able to read the image descriptions, and people who are browsing content via a slow internet connection. The reason behind that, as said before, is because people who use slow internet normally tend to turn off their images. But if your images have descriptions, they'll still be able to understand it. So cool. After showing some details about that accessibility technique for images, let me show you some examples that demonstrate this particular principle. Example, we're still under text descriptions for images. I'm going to move to the main content of this article. You may see an image in that screen. That's the main focus of this example for this web page. And I'm going to focus on that specific image on the screen, and please do listen closely to the screen reader screen. So if you weren't able to catch that, it said a visually impaired wheelchair-bound user waves his fist angrily at an inaccessible website on screen. That is the image description provided by the web developer. So even if I, as a totally blind person, wasn't able to see that image on the screen, since the web developer provided that very descriptive text description, I was still able to understand the message and the emotion being provided by that image. It could have been more succinct, but still it does the job. This is the next example. We're still under image descriptions. So, okay. So I'm going to move to the specific web form on the screen. So I'm going to move to the first text box, and I'm going to make the screen reader read the final control on this particular web form. So I'm just moving through organization, title, and I've moved to that specific control, which is an image link that doesn't have a text description. So this is what a screen reader would read when it finds an image link that does not have image description.
Link.
It's going to say link. It's able to tell me that this is a link, but since the web developer did not provide any text description, it won't be able to provide any meaningful information other than telling me that this particular control is a link. So my recommendation would be to understand the purpose of that image link and provide a brief description. Probably this is the submit button. I don't know, I'm just guessing. Okay, so that's the accessibility technique for the image links and how to provide textual description for them. This is the next technique,
Semantics.
semantic structure. People who use screen readers rely heavily on properly tagged HTML documents. So if you have headings, make sure that your headings are tagged properly by using the correct H tag. H and then the level of the heading. If you have lists, make sure that your lists are tagged properly by using the correct UL, OL, and the LI tags. You need to be able to do this HTML standard because the screen readers rely on properly tagged documents in order for them to provide meaningful semantic structure to screen reader users.
Heading list, bullet heading, bullet list and bullet for screen reader users. Out of list.
Let me show you some examples.
List with 2 items, user focus, user focus, user focus.
So, before doing so, I'm going to talk very briefly about a specific functionality of screen readers. Screen readers, in addition to reading content, they also provide keystrokes that enable me to move from one element to another. So, for example, I have a specific screen reader built-in keystroke that enables me to move from one heading to another. So by pressing the keystroke, the shortcut key, it enables me to focus to the next heading on your document. So let me show you this example after discussing that functionality. This is a heading that takes me to a specific section of that document. Now let me move on by moving to the next heading.
Message from the editor, heading level 2.
Message from the editor. So you may see a heading, a specific heading in your web page on screen that says message from the editor. And the reason why I was so able to quickly move to that HTML heading is because the headings were tagged properly. So let me move on to the next content.
What do we mean by user experience leadership? Heading level 2.
What do we mean by user? Let me just make the screen reader read that again.
Heading level 2. What do we mean by user experience leadership?
What do we mean by user experience leadership? So the main purpose of this example is to show you that even though I'm using a screen reader, I'm able to quickly navigate from one subsection to another because I can move from one heading to another. And the only way for me to do that is when the web developers tagged the headings properly. I won't be able to do that if they simply bolded the text to make them look like headings. Let me show you another example. Okay, cool. This is the next example. We're still under semantic structure. And let me show you a web page. And let me browse the web page and then tell you my thoughts about this particular page. So, so you have the transparency page of DICT. And after browsing this web page, I was able to see that there are specific headings under this subsection that have been bolded instead of using the correct H tags. So let me go to one specific heading. I'm just moving through the content using the screen reader. I'm just pressing the down arrow keys to move down the page.
The agency's mandates and functions, name of its circuit and contact in block quote 88.
There's Roman numeral number 1, who should have been a heading, but if you may see on the screen, it's just plain text because it's been bolded to make it look like headings. If you browse this web page, you'll also be able to see that there are other headings on this page that instead of using the correct heading tag, they simply use the bold format to make them look like headings. As a result, I won't be able to browse through the page quickly because I won't be able to use that heading shortcut key functionality of screen readers. So moving on,
Keyboard accessibility.
this is the next technique. So after talking about image descriptions and good semantics, let's move on to keyboard accessibility. The main people who will benefit from this are people with motor disabilities, people who can see but cannot use the mouse because they have limited fine motor skills. People who use screen readers will also benefit from this technique because people who use screen readers, such as people who are totally blind, do not use the mouse at all.
List with bullet ensure error.
In terms of keyboard accessibility, please do ensure that all of your contents can be accessed via the keyboard. Make sure that all of your links can be accessed using the tab key and can be activated using the enter key.
Bullets for people with bullet ensure error no key.
Also, please do ensure that there are no keyboard traps in your content. An example of a keyboard trap, an example of an instance involving a keyboard trap is a control that you can tab to, that you can focus on, but you cannot tab out of. So for instance, I would tab to a specific control, I would be able to focus on it, but once I, as a keyboard-only user, would tab away from it by pressing the tab key, I'm not able to do so, so I'm stuck in that control. And the only way for me to get out of that control is to close the browser and start all over again. The best tip that I can give you is to make sure that after you've finished your website, please do unplug the mouse and try to access your website using the keyboard. If all of your controls can be tabbed to, if all of your controls can be activated using the enter key and space bar, then your content is keyboard accessible. Let me show you an example. We're still on keyboard accessibility, and this is the example. Let me just move to that online form. Okay, so I'm just tabbing through the content. Last name, email, phone, combo box. I'm just tabbing through the content. So message, and here's where it gets interesting. After pressing the tab key, instead of going to that radio button that you might see on the screen, I move directly to the submit button. The issue behind this is I wasn't able to move through that radio button because the radio button is not keyboard accessible. So if you can use the mouse, then that's well and good because you'll be able to activate that radio button. But if you use the keyboard, if you can only use the keyboard and you cannot use the mouse, you won't be able to click that radio button because it's not in the tab order. So I'm at the message text box, and if I press the tab key, it moves directly to submit button. So this particular radio button that you might see on the screen is an example of content that is not keyboard accessible.
Keyboard. Out of list with 2. This will out of list next with use of cut.
Next technique. This is for people who are colorblind and people who are totally blind. When you're designing web content, please do make sure that you do not rely solely on color to convey information. Please do recognize that not everybody will be able to distinguish red from green or green from blue. This accessibility technique benefits people who are colorblind. Okay, let me show you some samples. Okay, so let me show you an example. You may see a specific screenshot on your screen. You might see the instruction telling me that as a returning customer, it's easy and only takes a few seconds. Just click on the orange button. So in this example, the text makes use of color-related instructions to tell the user what to do. So if you can see, there's a part there that says click on the orange button to perform a specific task. And you have an orange button there. But if you are colorblind and you cannot see, you cannot perceive which among the following controls is the orange one, you won't be able to make sense of that instruction. As a recommendation, it's good to actually mention the name of that control in your instruction. So we're not prohibiting you from using color as long as you're also providing textual information alongside that color-related instruction. Let me show you another example. Okay, so in this example, a specific tool provided by DTI, and if you can see the specific legend on this page, I'm hoping that you can also see the following legends on the screen. So a specific color represents the specific status of the specific business that you're searching for. So you have blue that represents a specific status. But if you won't be able to perceive through the colors as you are colorblind, you won't be able to make sense of the search results presented by this particular functionality because it solely relies on color to convey information.
Use of color, browser tab, use of color document, visited link next, descriptive link.
Now, this is the next accessibility technique. It deals with descriptive links. If you have links in your web pages, make sure that they describe the link's purpose.
Heading level, list with 4 items, bullet link text should be consistent.
Also, if you have multiple links that appear in all of your web pages that point to one specific resource, make sure that the link text in all of those links are provided with consistent names. Make sure that you only provide one link text that points to one specific resource. Please do avoid click here, read more, do it now, and similar link text because they really don't provide enough description to people with disabilities. The main people who will benefit from descriptive links include screen magnification users and people who use screen readers. Descriptive links are also very good for search engine optimization. As mentioned before in the previous, one of the previous pages, accessibility also benefits search engine optimization, and this is the best example for that. If you make your links descriptive, then there's a huge chance that your pages will be indexed properly by Google and the other search engines. Now for some samples.
List with 4 items searched on the homepage.
Here are some examples for the accessibility technique that deals with image links, descriptive links. So let me test this example and let me browse this web page with you. And let me just increase the volume of the screen reader. Now please do listen closely as I am exploring this web page.
Click on enter your load button. Click on search edit button. Burger King, out of list. Click on check it out link.
Check it out link. I'm just moving through the content using the tab key, and I have focused on a specific set of links that say
check it out link.
Check it out link. Now, if you're not able to see what's the image content on the screen, if you only rely on check it out, would you be able to understand the purpose of that link? I don't think so. And this is the main problem with this web page. Also, let me demonstrate a specific functionality where while we're talking about text descriptions for links, the screen reader has a specific functionality that lists down all of the links on your web page. But even with that functionality, if you encounter link texts that only say check it out, it's going to be very very difficult to understand what the purpose of that link is.
Burger King.
Let me show you other examples.
Overview hash smart broadband. About colon blank busy. About
We're still on descriptive links, and this is the next example.
Search dogs now.
Okay, this is another example. We're still on descriptive links. So this is a web page for the Accident Compensation Corporation in New Zealand,
Korean hash.
and
Edit as auto.
it has a specific search form, and testing that search form will hear
Any link.
any link. So any represents the search options that are present within this web form, but any, the text description on this particular link, doesn't really provide any description for this particular search option.
Any link.
So let me show you the specific functionality again.
Yes, but no button on search dogs.
Sorry.
Carrot. Pressing F7. Element. Editor.
So looking at that specific list, you won't really make sense of
Editor.
a series of links that all say any.
Any 36 on.
So if you rely only on the link text on this particular list of links, you can't really understand what the purpose of any is. So my recommendation would be to include that name, any location, any, and then include the name of that search option criteria on your specific link text.
Descript. Maui television link.
Let me show you another example.
About colon blank busy. About colon blank.
So moving on,
Color contrast. Planted.
this is the next technique. It deals with color contrast.
List.
The main people who will benefit from good color contrast includes people with low vision and basically everybody, because good color contrast is generally pleasing to the eyes, so everybody will be able to read your text comfortably, regardless of whether they have visual impairments or not.
Bullet contrast ratio.
When we talk about good color contrast, this means as you are designing your web page, make sure that the color of your text has good contrast against the color of your background. So basically, if you have dark colored text, make sure that you're using a lighter color of your background. If you have light colored text, make sure you're using a darker background. Some of the colors that you need to be aware of include green, pink, and light gray. If you need to make use of these color combinations, please do be careful and try to make your content have good color contrast in most of the areas of your page.
Bullet for people with low bullet contrast ratio.
The contrast ratio refers to the algorithm being used by developers as they are calculating the color contrast of your text and your background color.
Bullet for people with low.
As mentioned before, accessibility techniques also benefit people who do not have disabilities. And in this example, people who are browsing web content through their mobile device under sunlight will benefit a whole lot from good color contrast. And you do not have to have a visual impairment in order for you to appreciate that.
Bullet also for people browse out of list heading level. List with 1 items Wellington.
Samples. So on this web page, you may see a navigation bar that has yellow background and black text. There's also some areas that also have white text, especially if you use your mouse to focus on that navigation, main navigation bar. And it being yellow is already a point of concern, because yellow is one of the colors that you need to be aware of. And talking to other people with visual impairments, they find that this particular color combination is difficult to read. And if it looks off, to sighted people who have good eyesight, then it's 100 times more difficult for a person with visual impairment to read that content.
Color font. Out of list next visited link. Page titles planted.
This is the next accessibility technique after good color contrast. It concerns page titles. When you're providing content for your web pages, make sure that your titles describe the main content and purpose of your web page. And also make sure that your page titles are unique. The reason behind this is because the screen reader users read the page titles before actually browsing the web page. So your page titles need to describe the main content of your page because the titles are the first piece of information that blind people hear when they use a screen reader. Okay, we're on the first example under page titles, and you would see the web page for Yellow Pages Philippines. And while browsing this web page, as a blind person, the first piece of information that I'm going to make the screen reader speak is the page title. The reason behind that is since I'm not able to see the screen to confirm my location, I need some piece of information to let me confirm if I'm on the page that I need to go to. And that piece of information should be the page title. So I'm going to make the screen reader speak the page title.
Welcome to Yellow Pages.ph, Philippines Online Yellow Pages Directory Mozilla Firefox.
So it said, welcome to Yellow Pages Online PH, and some more text. So this being the home page, I would find that this particular page title here, the one that the screen reader just spoke, is descriptive enough because this is the home page that welcomes the users for this particular website.
Out of list with 2 items, X, 2 delivery.
So let's try using this because our main goal is to test the website for descriptive page titles. So let's test a specific establishment.
X,
Let me just try this here. Usually I would ask for example establishments from the audience. So let's just try any establishment.
Jollibee
Jollibee in Cubao. Now, the reason why I'm going to test this particular web page is I want to find out if the search results page has a descriptive page title. So what I just did is I entered Jollibee and Cubao on the specific text boxes. So my goal in showing you this example is to go to that search results page and test the page title if it is descriptive. Cool. Okay. Okay, cool. The screen reader has finally spoke. So let me test the search results page. Let me make the screen reader read the page title.
Jollibee in Cubao at Yellow Pages, not PH Mozilla Firefox.
So it said Jollibee in Cubao and then Yellow PH. So this search results page is an example of a web page that has properly descriptive page titles. The reason behind that, again, is because the screen reader read the page titles being
Jollibee in Cubao at Yellow Pages, not PH
Jollibee in Cubao at Yellow Pages. So Jollibee in Cubao properly describes the main content of this web page, which is the search results page for the contact numbers and contact information for Jollibee in Cubao.
Page type, Wanaka Rock Climbing.
Let me show you another example.
Auckland Co-op Shop Tap, Wanaka Auckland Co.
Auckland Co-op taxis.
Auckland.
Okay, so this is the next example still under page titles, and
Co-op.
let me just test this.
List with a Walker Taxi Environmental Business Services link.
Business services. So right now, I'm on the home page.
Out of list New Zealand's largest.
I'm at the home page of Auckland Co-op Taxis. And my goal is to go to another page on the same website and find out if the page titles are descriptive. So right now I'm at the home page. I'm going to make the screen reader read the page title.
Auckland Co-op Taxis Mozilla Fire.
It said Auckland Co-op Taxis. So let me go to another page on the same website. Now, we've gone to another page on the same website. We're now on another page on the same website. And let me check the page titles and try to find out if it is descriptive.
Auckland Co-op Taxis Mozilla Firefox.
My screen reader read the same page title. So the home page and this particular business services page have the same page title, and that's going to be an issue for blind people because the page title is the first piece of information that they would hear once they have browsed the succeeding pages on this website. So my recommendation would be to just include business services - Auckland Co-op Taxis on your page title.
Page type. Co-op tax. Out of list next with accessible forms.
This is the last accessibility technique, and it deals with accessible forms. People with visual impairments will benefit from this, especially the ones that use screen readers, and keyboard-only users will benefit from this particular accessibility technique.
Edit list with bullet ensure keyboard users can bullet associate.
When you're designing web forms, make sure that you're associating the labels with their corresponding text box or control. Make sure that when you're doing web coding, make sure that you're using the FOR attribute of your labels in order for them to be programmatically associated with their control. Also, make sure that when you're designing web forms, that keyboard-only users will be able to logically understand the sequence of the controls.
Bullet for screen reader use. Out of list heading level 3 sample page.
Let me show you some examples.
List with 2 items. Trade re-register. Inquiries hash. About colon. Inquiries hash.
Okay. So this is this example that dealing with accessible web forms. So let me explore this particular inquiry form.
No next edit. About.
Okay. This is the, we're going to use this example for, we're going to use this example for accessible web forms, and let me explore this web form, and just please listen closely to the screen reader.
Edit as autocomplete. Edit protected. Blank. Edit as autocomplete.
Okay. So I am at the start of the web form, and I'm trying to explore the text boxes and controls on this web form. Let's try to listen to how the screen reader reads the labels on the web forms.
Edit as autocomplete. Blank.
It said edit has autocomplete.
Edit protected. Blank.
Edit protected. Now, if you may notice, there are specific labels on this particular web form that sighted people can see. But if you use a screen reader, the screen reader doesn't read the labels on all of these,
on
all of the text boxes. Now that's very unfortunate because I rely on the labels on this web form in order for me to understand the purpose of the labels of the text boxes before I'm able to know what information to fill in to the following text boxes. So
heading, privacy policy link, table, edit as autocomplete.
This is an example of a web form that has labels that haven't been programmatically associated with their controls. And that's a big problem, especially to people who use screen readers. Because if you do not associate your labels with your controls, the screen reader won't be able to read the labels, so the screen reader will not be able to tell me what information is being required on that particular control. Here is an example.
Table, edit as autocomplete, blank.
The screen reader said edit has autocomplete. Now, if this were properly labeled, the screen reader would speak the label of that particular control before actually saying the word edit. But since this is not properly labeled, I only end up with edit because the screen reader wasn't able to read the label.
Accessible. Out of list next visited. Useful links. Planted. List.
So after talking about accessible web forms, let me finish up with some useful links that you can visit right now.
Out of heading level 2 useful links. List with 4 items bullet. Link NVDA.
Now, the first useful resource would be the homepage for NVDA.
NV access hash visit code.
nvaccess.org.
NV access visit.
So, NVDA stands for Non-Visual Desktop Access. NVDA is a free and open source screen reader, which is the one that I'm using right now to do this accessibility talk. You can visit the homepage for NVDA at nvaccess.org. You can download a copy of the free and open source screen reader called NVDA from this particular resource.
Useful.
Next resource.
Bullet. Link creating accessor. WebAIM code.
This resource is under the webaim.org website, webaim.org. This is a blog series that talks about the techniques that you can do to create accessible web forms. So previously we talked about the general idea of an accessible web form. Here are the specific techniques that you can do to ensure that your web form, that your contact form, that your survey form, or your registration form would be accessible to people with all types of disabilities.
Useful bullet. Link WebAIM color contrast. WebAIM.
As we have talked about good color contrast in one of the techniques, here is a very useful tool that will enable you to check your background and your foreground color for good accessible, good color contrast. So still under the webaim.org website, they have the color contrast checker, and this consists of a text box for your foreground color. You need to input the hexadecimal value for your foreground color. You have an option to lighten the foreground, and another text box wherein you need to put the hexadecimal value of your background color, and a specific control that you can activate in order for you to find out if the color contrast of your web page meets the international accessibility guidelines. Lastly, we have the Accessibility University, Accessible University.
Mozilla Firefox, Accessible University 3.0 visit, mainland.
Lastly, we have the Accessible University 3.0. This is a website for a fictional university. The main purpose of this particular web page is to demonstrate format that has been presented in an inaccessible version, and the same exact format presented in an accessible version. So on this particular example,
Accessible University 3.0 Mozilla Firefox.
I think you have the inaccessible version here, and it has a page containing the accessibility issues and a succeeding page which displays the accessible version. Very easy to find on Google. You just need to enter accessible version, Accessible University 3.0 on Google in order for you to find this web page. Again, the main purpose of this web page is to demonstrate format that has been displayed in an inaccessible version and the same exact content in an accessible version. You also have a link that goes to the
academics, navigation, visit, out of menu bar, mainland, previous slide, flat, next slide, accessible universe.
You also have a link that points to the accessibility issues
Accessible University 3.0 colon. List of accessible.
that are present in the inaccessible version of that web page. So this page explains the issues, the things that need to be corrected, as well as some recommendations. That concludes the web accessibility talk, and thank you very much for listening.